Hi, my name is Ryan Hopkins. I'm a partner on the construction team at White & Case in Houston, Texas. To be clear, I'm not a construction litigator. I specialize in construction from conception through execution. My career began as an engineer, and my fascination with building projects continues. In fact, if I had my way, I would wear blue jeans, steel-toe boots, and a hard hat to the office every day. Advising my project teams through the years has required me to develop simple strategies to help them manage the enormous workload they face on a daily basis. And today I'm going to talk to you about the first part of that strategy, project communications. There are two follow-on presentations that will integrate these project communication strategies into contract management and defending the contract. So what I've found is that most project teams are motivated, highly skilled, and love the challenge of projects, but they are often understaffed and overwhelmed. And those of us that negotiate deals for a living spend months and months inside a contract worrying over every detail. When we finally reach agreement, the approvals are given and the contract executed, we just cannot wait to take those multiple 3-inch binders and drop them on the project director's desk and say good luck. But what I've noticed is that in the rush to meet the day-to-day challenges of construction projects, our project teams lose sight of their fundamental communication and contract management skills in exchange for expediency. With normal construction difficulties, challenging relationships, and to the surprise of every lawyer, ambiguous contract terms, they just do not have the capacity to manage everything and build the project. While I wish there was some grand secret to tell, the fact is that a return to basic communication skills and fundamental contract execution alleviates a lot of the distractions. So what are the basic communication skills that are key to project communications? 1, keep it simple. 2, be factual. And 3, be complete. Now, if you have children, you probably remember telling your toddler or young child to do something. I have a 7- and 4-year-old. The other night, I let them stay out later than normal to play under the streetlights because it's still summer here in Houston. As they entered the house, I said, go straight to your rooms, get into your pajamas, brush your teeth and hair, and go to the restroom and get into bed. Why did I say it with that much detail? Because as you may remember, if you don't tell them directly to where to go, they will go somewhere else. If you don't tell them what to do, they will do something else. And if you don't tell them clearly what to do when they are finished, they will either do something else or come ask you 1,000 questions. The same rules apply to business communication. Keep it simple, be factual, and be complete. So what do I mean by keep it simple? Well, first, use plain language. Do you remember basic sentence structure from grade school? There just is no confusion in a sentence that contains a clear subject, verb, and object. For example, Pandora opened the box. Who did it? Pandora. What did she do? She opened something. What was that something? A box. Unfortunately, we're all taught to write like we talk. Add to that the language we learn from contracts, different regions of the world, and specific job sites, and our writing becomes inefficient and unclear. Second, avoid acronyms and technical jargon, slang, and jokes. Now, if you've ever worked with the government on a project, then you understand the frustration of encountering acronyms. Or, if you've worked in another country, or even part of a country, then you've likely encountered slang and jargon that had a meaning you may not know. Similarly, jokes, whether spoken orally or in writing, weaken communications. Now, specifically, acronyms, jargon, slang, and jokes become problems in future litigation because they lose context and are subject to the interpretation of others. Which brings us to one of my favorites. Do not use legal words and expressions. If you've negotiated engineering, procurement, and construction contracts, then you may have realized at some point, engineers want to be lawyers and lawyers want to be engineers. Which, by the way, is why my team is generally composed of people that are both, to facilitate negotiations. Neither can resist modifying each other's portions of the contract. Now, I bring that up because most of the time we catch that during negotiations. But when you have project personnel interpreting the contract or using legal words in communications, it can cause real issues for the company in future disputes. Second, be factual. Do not exaggerate or offer opinions, such as watching for adjectives and adverbs. These are often easily found by looking for words that end in Y or LY. Now, there is a caveat to opinion, of course. If your opinion is requested, or it's part of your role, and you have the expertise, then providing your opinion is acceptable, because you are presumably aware as an expert that you will likely be called as a witness during any related dispute, and treated accordingly by the lawyers. You also should use emotion deliberately and cautiously. Now, there was a time when I taught that you should not use emotion in project communications. but I've come to realize that isn't always practical, and emotion can be a useful tool when properly employed. Just be conscious of its use and your communications will improve. Now, opinions and emotions are important tools in communication, especially daily communication. They add color to our lives and make conversation interesting. However, they can be very, very difficult during a dispute. So, now the most difficult part. Try and be complete. Providing a complete story when possible. Almost every time I teach this full course on communications, someone in the audience will raise their hand and say, well, can't you just look at the string of emails? If you could only see the grin that brings to a litigator's face. It's possible that the complete story is there, but there are a lot of issues with that. One, it's not your version of the story, and you are the witness. And two, that string of emails is going to identify other people, other stories, other facts, and possibly other claims. To avoid this, try and make your communications clear by including enough factual background to ensure that context is clear. And if you go back to the first two basic communication skills, use simple and factual writing, your communications should be shorter and convey exactly what you intended, which will naturally lead you to a more complete story. And finally, close all open issues. If you're the person responsible for email strings or making decisions, then it would be nice if you could go down through the entire email string, pull out all the open issues, make the decisions you need to make, or defer decisions to other email strings. That way we close the issues. Now, I brought an example with me of an email from a prior employer. This office and our team has let the project down badly. We are now in a very difficult and vulnerable position with our contractor because we failed to provide technical data on time. I'm really very upset with you guys. Now, the author of this email has given me everything I need as an attorney to discredit him and the company, possibly divide the team, and influence the outcome of the dispute. Now, certainly the Y and LY words should stand out to you as giving the author's opinion and emotion. However, the emotion can be interpreted to be anything from sadness to disappointment to anger, which is a very important reminder. The reader often imparts their current emotional state into their reading. As you can see from this email, it isn't factual, it lacks context, and probably was unnecessary. So now you have the basic communication skills. What are the keys to project communications? First and foremost, stay within the contract. Certain project communications are controlled by the contract, such as notices and changes. You have to know and follow the form requirements, whether it's a letter, an email, or a fax, the time periods, and the designated persons and copy requirements. Why? Staying within the contract sets a good example both internally and externally. It keeps things professional, it reduces conflicts, reduces risk of personnel exceeding their authority, and forces the parties to know and abide by the agreement. An easy example is invoices. Now, unfortunately, in big projects, invoicing often becomes convoluted. While I was working as an in-house attorney at a large company, I was brought in to help a project team resolve their invoicing issues. The project had gotten 6 months behind on payments for invoices because both parties had gotten away from the contract. My first step was to set up a face-to-face meeting at the owner's headquarters with the person responsible for approving the invoices. And I also requested that he bring the person responsible for reviewing the invoices. Now, it was an Egyptian company, so we had black tea and discussed almost everything but invoicing for half the time. But during the meeting, I was able to learn that this person was generally pleased with our work, detail-oriented, and overworked. I also was able to attain a list of deficiencies for the invoice that I had brought with me. Now, I spent the next week gathering further documentation, ensuring that everything required by the contract was included, the distribution was correct, and even setting up the documents in a logical order with colored dividers between the different sections. The next week, we met again for tea and walked through the invoice one more time and agreed on a few minor changes. Once I had that invoice prepared, I was able to submit it. I repeated this process for 6 weeks and was able to get the project caught up on 6 months worth of invoicing. And we created an agreed template and format that prevented further delays in invoice payments. Staying within the contract reduces friction between the parties. You also should establish and use a project communication protocol. Now, most companies that I've encountered have well-developed delegations of authority. They ensure that the buck stops somewhere, that the responsibility and authority are properly aligned. Now, that is not to say that most companies properly develop sub-delegations for their projects. But why do I mention delegations of authority at all? Well, because companies should have communications protocols as well, especially for large projects. Why? Simply because not everyone needs to know everything. We've gotten comfortable for multiple reasons copying everyone that we know on email chains. But if you attend the Defend session, I will tell you why that is a really bad idea. So what does a good project communication protocol do? It expands upon the contract requirements and delegates appropriately for effective management of the project. It also establishes proper controls. It reduces the number of miscommunications and increases the efficiency. It hopefully reduces the costs and disputes as well by creating a simplified and clearer record. And while I've already said that not everyone needs to be involved in every single communication, it ensures the proper distribution of essential information for decision making and also prevents surprises. It should be evaluated and adjusted periodically. So if you apply the basic communication principles, you keep it simple, you be factual and be complete, your project teams will increase efficiency and reduce their workload by communicating more effectively. If you go one step further and structure your project communications to stay within the contract and align with internal policies using a project communication protocol, your project issues will be reduced and fewer disputes will arise. Now, once you understand how to communicate, it becomes vitally important to know what to communicate. I will cover that in the next session, Contract Management. Thank you.